about this wide. They're all just growing together in this big clump. So I basically had to bare root them. But now each one's got their own space. Once the plants fully recover from being moved, they're going to be big, beautiful, healthy, everything's going to work out great. And it's going to look like I started off this way, but I didn't. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and it's an overcast morning, and it's an overcast kind of week. There's a chance of rain today, chance of rain tomorrow, chance of rain the next day, that sort of thing, right? And I've been waiting for a stretch of days like this. We haven't had one for over a month. And the reason I've been waiting for this to happen is that I got a number of plants. When you plant a row of seeds in a garden, it may be the case that every one of those seeds germinates, but oftentimes for me, a clump of them germinate, and the other part of the soil there's nothing growing. But I usually plant things, overseed things, so I can take that clump and pull some of those out and reposition them. So when you look at my garden tours in July and August, everything's neat, everything's organized, everything's spaced out, everything looks good, and I didn't start that way. I mean, in some cases I did, it really depends. But there's lots of garden beds I have where things are coming in a sort of uneven way. And when I have a stretch of rainy days coming, that's when I move things around, and that's what I'm doing today. So I haven't got a lot of time this morning, but I wanted to just take you around and show you a couple beds where I've moved things about a month ago, something I moved just the other day, and some things that still need to be moved, just to give you some ideas about that sort of thing. It's a very useful way. I mean, if you got two plants growing really close to one another, neither of those plants is really going to achieve its growth potential, right? They're competing for the same resources. I know there's a tendency among a certain category of gardener that just likes to, everything just happens in nature, and it's all just, the seeds just fall to the ground and it all works itself out and it's all wonderful and fanciful and great. And there's an element of truth to that. But the reality is that if you want to get the best results out of your plants, it's worthwhile to do a little intervention, right? Because there's only so much resources, and the plants will just do better if the plant can get the most sun, the most water, and the most nutrients. It can possibly take up. It's going to do better than if it's getting half of that, or 1/3 of that, or 75% of that, right? So let's go have a look around the garden, and let me show you some examples of stuff like that. All right, so here's a bed of Swiss chard. And initially, I planted all of these under a little sort of, I call it a mini greenhouse, right? Very early in the year, and they all germinated well. And then I took some of them, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, I can't remember exactly, but I plucked some of these out and moved them and repositioned them here. And for the first 2 weeks, these looked like they were basically going to die because we didn't get any rain that week. It was not the ideal time to move them. But I would put, a sort of white painting tarp over them during the day to keep the sun off of them. And I just watered them and sort of, coaxed them along. You can move plants when it's sunny and not overcast, but you have to intervene a lot and, keep the sun off them when it's intense. So they can just adapt to the situation, because you're disturbing the roots, and depending on, if you can take a huge clump of soil with a plant, it may not even know it's been moved. But when they're in close like this, you tend to, strip some of the soil off the roots and almost bare root them. So they need a little bit of coaxing along. But you can tell, these ones aren't as big as these, so they were set back by being moved, but they look healthy, they're doing good, they're going to be fine, right? I just need to get some mulch in here. And this bed's going to be great. So I still got some more. It's still a little bit too thick over here. These need to be thinned out. I got to find some places to put these. And this is the week I got to do all that stuff, because I don't know if we're going to get another stretch of rainy days like this for quite some time. Now here's another bed where I had to reposition this kale. I had kale, spinach, and this other sort of sorrel type green going down here. And I've been in the process of harvesting the spinach. The spinach is just about all done here. At this time of year it starts to bolt and stuff. So this row, you see how it's sort of empty over here? I'm going to take kale out of the middle. They're very thick. They're too thick right now. The kale are right, there's like an inch of space between each kale plant. Kale should be spaced 2 handspans apart, in my opinion, at least, right? Because these things can get almost 2 feet high and they, take up about that much space, right? So this whole row is going to be kale. And these kale were ones that I moved at the same time I moved that Swiss chard. I did a video on it if you look back. I'll put a link to it at the end of this video because this is kind of like a follow-up, I guess. But these were looking pretty rough when they were moved. And the same thing, I had to sort of coax them along. But look at them now. I mean, these are nice, healthy looking kale plants, right? Here's some more kale that I moved from a different garden bed. About 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago. I had to remove a few leaves and they really suffered because it was just so sunny and hot when I moved them. And because this is a raised bed, this bed's maybe a foot, the soil level's about a foot above grade. It just doesn't seem to get the same amount of water as a lower bed. There's no irrigation system here or anything. Once the roots of these plants get good and deep, there'll be no issues. But anyway, these were grown somewhere else. And see how they're all nice and neat and evenly spaced, right? But where I took them, they're growing in a space about this wide. They're all just growing together in this big clump. So I basically had to bare root them. But now that each one's got their own space, once the plants fully recover from being moved, they're going to be big, beautiful, healthy, everything's going to work out great. And it's going to look like I started off this way, but I didn't. Here's a bed where I've got some broccoli and Swiss chard growing now. This is an interesting bed because these started growing really strong, and then I started them very early, and they were growing really well. And I started them early under a plastic dome, right? A microclimate, a mini greenhouse. And I took the greenhouse off, and we had frost, and they shrugged off the frost, didn't bother them. Then we had another frost that was really hard, and I lost, I don't know, about 60% of the plants I had here. They just didn't come back from it. They were really hammered by it. Kale can take a good frost, and spinach and lettuce can take a good frost. And even though broccoli and cauliflower are in the same general family as kale, I find them a bit more, they can take frost, but they can't take like a hard freeze. Certainly not when they're young. When they're more mature, like in October, I find them a bit tougher. But when they're really little like this, you're going to lose some of the foliage, and it can just really set the plant back. Anyway, so all that was left here was a handful of a clump growing here. That's it. There was like a 2 foot wide clump of plants growing. Maybe they found one of them was fairly large. Maybe it shielded the other ones from the frost. I don't know. So just yesterday I spread these all out, and they're still a bit too tightly spaced. I still have to, these ones here really don't belong. But it was sunny yesterday, and I had to coax them along. So all I did was put a stake here and a stake here. I got this old bag, leaf bag. I just put it over the plants, used a couple rocks to hold it down. And I put it on around 10 in the morning. I'm lucky I'm working from home right now, but if this had been a normal year and I was commuting to work, I just would have come out this time of the morning. It's like 6:30 a.m. right now, and just covered them and left them like that all day. And you've got to do that for about, if it's sunny, you got to do that for about 3 days, and then you take it off, around supper time, let them get a little bit of sun, but you can't let them get that full sun during the day because, depending on how you move them, so these plants look really nice, right? But I moved them yesterday morning and they looked like this. And then I came out in the afternoon and the leaves were just, just flopped down dead sort of thing. So I hit them with some more water, put the cardboard bag over them. And when I came out around, 6 o'clock yesterday, they were picked back up. I took the cardboard off and let the evening mist and everything at them, and just left them out like this, right? And if it gets sunny again today, I'll put the cardboard over them. But even if you're a person who has to, go to work and work all day, and you're gone, normally when it's not COVID-19, I'm gone from the house 10 hours a day. I got to commute and I got a full-time job. So you just cover them in the morning and do that for a few days, and then just give the roots some time to work their way into the soil and recover from the stress of being moved. Anyway, these are doing great right now, right? Here's a bed where I've got some collard greens growing, and there's a lot of weeds in here, and the bed's a bit of a mess. So I've been holding off on moving them. They're planted quite closely together. Each plant is about 1 or 2 inches apart from the other, but this doesn't look like much, but in 2 months, mark my words, this bed will be filled with collard greens. They'll be big, beautiful, and lush, and I'm going to have awesome collard greens this year. The variety is called flash collards. I'm very confident, even though it just looks like a little clumpy, weedy mess. But a lot of the plants I just showed you, like those big looking kale in the slightly raised bed, they were like this when I plucked them out and moved them, right? But this is the right time to do it. So today or tomorrow, I'm going to take this mulch off, even the soil, reposition all of these, give it a serious watering. Even though it was misty and sort of overcast all night, the soil's still a bit dry here. Give it a really good watering, and after about 3 days of being overcast and rainy, these should be on their way. And this is going to be a nice, organized looking garden with every plant getting the most. I mean, the fact that it looks organized doesn't really matter so much. What's important is that each plant is going to have the space it needs to achieve its sort of full potential, right? Become a really big, healthy plant and give you lots of nice big green leaves for your you know, I don't know if you eat collard greens, but I love them. Over here I've got a squash garden, and these, I got 3 growing right here, and they're nice and big. Over here, for whatever reason, all the squash disappeared, and varying degrees of success elsewhere in the bed. So, in the spaces where there's no, I mean, I basically can't have 3 growing like this together. One of these has to stay here, the others have to be moved. So I'll be using this big one, putting it over here. You know, using this one, there's a space over there where there's 2. Neither of them looks particularly good. So this one looks better than the 2 that are over there. So I'll probably move that one over there, that sort of thing, right? So, you know, in a few months, this will be a nice big, healthy looking squash garden, even though right now it looks a bit, you know, weedy and out of control. That's just part of the process. Here's another example of that same thing. I got a zucchini garden, and I got some big ones over there, and there was one right here, and it just disappeared. Don't know what happened. But I tend to plant my zucchini in 2s or 3s even, because sometimes one of the plants doesn't make it. So the ones over there need to be thinned, and this is a good place to stick one of them, right? If you look down the garden, each of these plants, in some cases there's 2 plants, so everywhere where there's 2 plants, one of those plants is going to be plucked out and either just thrown away or repositioned somewhere else in the garden. I mean, it's a lot of zucchini. My wife loves, I make this zucchini relish that she loves, and I find one bed about this size, you know, 4 by 10, 3 by 12, that sort of size. You know, about a dozen zucchini plants will give you about 21 liter jars of zucchini, and just about all the zucchini you care to eat during a gardening season. Now here's the bed where I had some of those kale growing that I moved over there, and looking a bit crazy right now, but this is going to be potatoes. I'm going to plant these probably today. So everything in here is going to come out. There's still some nice big dill growing here, but I got lots of dill everywhere. And there's some big lettuce growing over here, but my wife says it doesn't taste any good anymore. It's gone bitter. So, I mean, what's the point of growing something if no one's going to eat it, right? These are spinach that have bolted, right? They're just done, right? And I've eaten, you know, basically I've cut these down a number of times and eaten the florets and everything. So, I mean, this garden is just done. Being a green garden, but there's still enough time to get a potato garden in. So this messy, disorganized looking garden in a couple months is just going to look like a big, lush green potato garden. Here's a spot in my garden where what I'd planned to grow here just didn't work for whatever reason. I'd planned to grow this plant called salsify. I bought a new variety, and some of them came in. This is one here. A couple of them came in, but it didn't really come in strong. And there just happened to be a whole bunch of kale seeds here that had blown off of I'd let a kale plant go to seed last summer. And I guess a lot of the seeds fell to the ground. They just started growing on their own. But there's way too many and way too thick. So what I need to do in this bed, and this is again the right time to do it, is pull just about everything out except the salsify. The few salsify I have, I want to grow. I want to see what this variety tastes like. See if I want to buy more next year. So I need to pull the kale out, give the salsify. It's just this really skinny, almost looks like an onion green at this stage, but it looks more like grass when it's growing. And it makes this long, sort of tapered root like a parsnip, but it doesn't taste like a parsnip. Anyways, a neat kind of plant. So I got to reorganize this space to give the salsify the room it needs to grow, get it so it can get light and that sort of stuff, and make use of these greens by spreading them out. You know, whenever I have a tasty plant just grow on its own wild, I sort of want to give that plant a chance because it fought its way into this world, right? It's probably going to reward me for, letting it hang around. Here's an interesting plant I've got here. It's called bloody dock. And there's a bit of foliage hanging over this that's not good. But you can see, not these green plants, but these ones that seem variegated, okay, over here, right? So I seeded this whole thing. I think it's supposed to be a perennial plant that comes back every year. I've got different kinds. I've got another plant called curly dock that grows in my garden that's like a weed, but you can eat it. And the same thing with this bloody dock. It's you'd put it in soups and things like that, but it's supposed to be kind of tough, traditional perennial from different parts of the world. So I thought if I could give it its space here and get it growing, each of these plants is supposed to be 2 feet wide and 2 feet high. So I certainly have too many growing here, but from about here over, there's hardly any growing at all. And they're basically all growing in a clump here. There's probably 30 plants here, and just a couple over here and a couple over there. So these are going to have to be, I'm just showing you the early stage of plants that need to be moved, right? These are all growing too close to one another. There really should only be 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 of these plants growing in this whole bed. But it's way too early to move these. They're so little, right? I have to wait till these are maybe 8 inches high, 6 inches high, that sort of thing, right? What would that be, like 15 centimeters, that sort of thing? So, yeah, some of these things you just have to wait and be patient, right? And for that matter, when they're really small like this, if there's weeds growing in with them, you kind of have to resist the urge to pull the weeds, because when they're really small like this and you pull a weed that's right next to a plant, you can pull the whole plant out and just kill it. So you just got to sort of, the weeds that are, nearby, sure, you can pull them, right? But the weeds that are right next to the plant, you got to just sort of let things happen. Anyway, some of those beds that I've got, an entire bed full of plants, started off with just, this is, about 14 inches of plants. And this many plants could fill an entire 4x8 bed, right? Because a plant that becomes 2 feet wide, you can only have so many of those in a 4x8 bed. So yeah, the fact that things aren't growing exactly where you planted them, and your garden beds aren't coming in the sort of organized way that you'd envisioned, that's not the end of the world, because you can move and reposition things. And when it's overcast, I can literally see the mist in the air right now, right? When you get a stretch of rainy days or overcast days, that's the time to get that work done. I like to be relaxed in the garden. I like to do things when I feel like it. But there's some things that, there's a time to do it. There's a time when all the conditions are right, and it's just so much less work when you're working. The example of those plants where I got to put cardboard over them and take it off and put it back on and water them and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to just sticking them in the ground and letting it rain for 3 days, right? So when it's time to do something, when nature's telling you, get up, get away from the computer, get out there in your garden and get everything, do the things your garden needs to be the best garden it can be. You got to move, you got to do it. So I hope you found that interesting. Just give you a little bit of look under the hood of how I get a really productive, fulfilling garden later in the season. It all happens earlier in the season when I'm making these kinds of decisions. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell so you know when I make new videos. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.